Welcome to Reduce Your Stress with Tim Ringgold. I'm a board-certified music therapist, author, and expert on how to use music to relieve stress fast. This episode of Reduce Your Stress with Tim Ringgold is sponsored by Dr. Nisi, trainer and certifier of master and executive coaches, because she believes every person, every relationship, every business, and your finances should be extraordinary. Find out more about Dr. Nisi Moore and the Life Coaching Institute at www.drnisi.com. That's DRNEECIE.com. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Reduce Your Stress with Tim Ringgold. It's so great to be with you, and I'm so glad you're here. This week, we're going to hear from an extraordinary man that I met at my one and only live business conference of 2021, Mr. Michael Unbroken. Michael's personal story is a testament to the resilience of the human being. It's not that we want to get competitive with our suffering or our struggles. You've heard it before. Just after you express something you're going through, somebody immediately counters with, "You think that's bad, ... yada, yada, yada." Then they go on to try to one-up you on your own challenges. Great, thanks. Having said that, there is something called perspective, which we can use to put our challenges into some sort of framework of understanding. Let's face it, some things simply are more challenging than others. And when we hear another person's story when not presented as a counterpunch, we can take inspiration in that story. You know, the inspiration goes something like this. Wow. If blank got through blank, maybe I can get through this. In addition to having an inspiring story, Michael's going to give you two key frameworks to help you through any stressful situation you're facing. So sit back, relax, get inspired, and I'll see you on the other side. Michael Unbroken is a best-selling author, speaker, coach, podcaster, and advocate for adult survivors of childhood trauma. Michael, welcome to the Reduce Your Stress Summit for Healthcare Professionals. And please, the audience wants to know, what was the last concert you went to before the pandemic?
Hey, Tim, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you to everyone for also being here this morning or afternoon, wherever you are in the world. The last show I went to was actually the Black Keys in Chicago.
Black Keys. That must have been a great show.
It was a great evening. I miss it dearly. I cannot wait until if and or when we are back to whatever semblance of normality is next.
Right. I feel that. All right. So my friend, the stage is yours.
Brilliant. I'm super excited. So first off, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for spending some time with me this morning. Shelly, Nora, Donna, Judy, Sharon, Tim. I can't see any more names, but I appreciate you guys all being here. So this morning, I'm going to talk to you about this concept about how to think unbroken. And this is about understanding the impact of trauma. So as we start into today, I always think about this. What is my intention? Why am I here today? What is it that I want to accomplish? What do I want to learn? What is one thing that I can implement today that I can carry into my life moving forward? One of the biggest mistakes that we make when we go to conferences or do virtual summits or seminars is we learn all this stuff, we write down all these notes, and we do nothing with it. And so my challenge to you, I want you to think about creating an intention today about taking one thing that you learn throughout the course of the day and applying it to your life immediately, not tomorrow, not in a week, not after you write down your notes and you put it in your spreadsheet and you come back and you look at it again and then you put it under the desk and never see it again, but today. Why? Because you can create change in your life starting right now. So a little bit about me. So as Tim mentioned, I'm an author, speaker, coach, entrepreneur, and advocate for adult survivors of childhood trauma. But that wasn't always my story, of course. See, when I was 4 years old, my mother, who was a drug addict and alcoholic, she actually cut off my right index finger. And my stepfather was hyper abusive, the kind of guy that you pray is never your stepfather. And I spent the majority of my childhood homeless and in poverty. And in fact, we were so poor that the water company came and they turned our water off. Now, that was because my parents were spending their money on drugs and alcohol and who knows what else. But this was happening growing up in America. And one day I went to the backyard and I took this little blue bucket and I walked across the street and turned on the neighbor's spigot. And for the first time, I stole. And I promised myself when I was older, I said, Michael, when you're a grown up, this won't be your life. Well, at 12 years old, I started doing drugs. And at 13, I got drunk for the first time. By 15, I was expelled from school. And luckily, I got put into a last chance program, but I still didn't graduate high school on time. In fact, they just handed me my diploma and they were like, you have to get out of here. We don't even know why you're here. And as I was heading into my teens, I was thinking about like, well, what is life supposed to really be? And I knew that if I stayed on the course I was heading, I was going to be dead or in jail. I have family who's in prison for life. Some of my best friends had been arrested. Some of my 3 childhood best friends had been murdered. And I knew that if I kept down that path, I was going to be next. And I was trying to think about like the solution for poverty, for abuse, for all the dark things that happened to us. And I thought it must be money, right? It must be money. So I made a declaration to myself. By the time I'm 21, I want to make 6 figures legally. And I did. I ended up working for a Fortune 10 company, no high school diploma and no college degree, because I got really clear about my intention and what I wanted to do. Now, of course, the old adage, money doesn't always make life better, certainly was not in my case. And I found myself by age 26, 350 pounds, smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day and drinking myself to sleep. And that's when I put a gun in my mouth. You see, I didn't understand the impact of trauma. I didn't understand the impact of abuse. I didn't understand things like what happens to you in your youth can dictate who you become as an adult. And then what happened is I started thinking about my life. And I went and I looked in the mirror and I didn't recognize the reflection on the other side. But I did remember that moment of being a little kid when I made that promise to myself that, Michael, when you're grown up, this won't be your life. And at that moment, as I looked in the mirror, I asked myself, Michael, what are you willing to do to have the life that you want to have? And the words, no excuses, just results, just started reverberating in my brain. And I got super clear about something in that moment. I wasn't going to hide from the trauma anymore. I wasn't going to hide from the abuse. What I was going to do is I was going to own my story instead of allowing my story to own me. You see, because I spent so much time stuffing it down, hiding from it. In 5 minutes, you know more about me than people who knew me for 27 years because I was scared. I was terrified of it. It was weak. Right? It felt weak to ask for help. It felt weak to go to therapy and be serious about it. It felt weak to be a vulnerable human being, admitting that bad things have happened to you. And I discovered something in this journey as I got serious about it. I went and I got serious about therapy. I got serious about group therapy, EMDR, CBT, AA, NA, SA, all the A's. I started doing all the work. And then I started educating myself about the impact of trauma because I believe that education is everything. And today I have over 35 certifications from some of the leading experts in trauma in the world. And I got serious about personal development. I used to be the guy that would see the personal development guys on stage and I would laugh at them and be like, who do these guys think they are? And then I recognized something really important. And that is when you look to people who are just simply one step ahead of where you want to be, then you can leverage their experience to create momentum in your life. And as you look at and as you get deeper into your life, I think the most difficult thing that we do as survivors, if you've had any traumatic experience, is to acknowledge it. People always ask me, what's step 1 in healing? What's step 1 in healing? Step 1 for me has always felt like acknowledgement. And let me be clear, acknowledgement does not mean culpability. We are not responsible for the terrible and dark things that have happened in our lives. But the hard part about it is that it is your life. And from this moment forward, you are going to be the one who has to create change in it. Unfortunately, no one is coming to rescue you. And there is no Disney moment. Magically, your life won't be different like that unless you make a choice and you take action and you create a pathway to what's next. You see, with acknowledgement, I truly, truly believe this, that with acknowledgement comes freedom. And in that freedom is peace. It's that thing we're always seeking, right? It's that feeling of, and acknowledgement's also simultaneously the most difficult thing, because in that we have to face the truth of vulnerability within ourselves. And we have to understand with that, there is no culpability. It is not our fault for the things that happen to us. And yet we carry the shame, we carry the guilt, we feel like maybe it is. But I want to share something with you. If you go and you dive deep into looking at the research and the surveys around childhood trauma and abuse, you understand that, and I believe this statistic is actually phenomenally low, that 83% of adults have had an adverse childhood experience. Now, this was a survey done, Dr. Felitti, Kaiser Permanente, and the California CDC in the 90s. And I would argue that it's inconclusive. And this was a series of 10 questions to see if possibly there was any correlation between childhood adverse experiences and long-term detrimental ramifications. And what they found was staggering. And so what they determined was 83% of adults in America probably answered yes to a series of one of these questions. Were you ever hurt as a child? Were you sexually abused as a child? Did you have a parent who was divorced? Did you have a parent who was a drug addict? Did you ever not feel security or safe? Did you not get nourished? Were you abused? And the list goes on and on. I won't go into all 10 questions right now, but you can Google the ACE survey to answer these questions for yourself, excuse me. And I found in this research, one of the most incredible moments happened for me, because for the first time in my life, I was able to make a distinct correlation between the experiences that I had as a child and how I was living my life as an adult. You see, because I have an ACE score of 10. I answered yes to every one of these questions. And I know that many of you are in the medical field, so you are familiar with this. And that score of 10, that carries a death sentence. You can go look at the statistics. If you have a score of 4 or more, you're 2,000% more likely to smoke. You're 2,200% more likely to drink. You're 5,000% more likely to be depressed, and over 5,000% more likely to commit suicide. If I go back and I look at being 26 years old, I was like, check, 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 check. And in that, what happened in that research, and maybe this is because my brain is very analytical, I finally understood something. Wow, there's causation here. There's correlation here. There is truth in the fact that if you go through traumatic experiences as a child, you very likely will face ramifications as an adult. And so what do you do with that information? What do you do with that knowledge? What I'm always thinking about is how do you understand the ramifications that it carries in your body, not just in doing the things like smoking and drinking, but the likelihood of having cardiovascular disease, pulmonary embolisms, to have asthma, to have migraines, to have your body literally break down on you. And that's what happened to me when I was 29 years old. And I found myself for the next 2 years going to 45 different doctors around the country trying to figure out what was going wrong. And then I understood something, the impact of toxic stress, and how when you grow up in a cortisol state, your body is constantly in fight or flight in the sympathetic nervous system, which is meant for survival. It's fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And when you're in that, when you're growing up in your formative years, and that's the only thing you know, it leads to places like dissociation, acting without thinking about it. It leads to these moments in which it's much easier to drink yourself to sleep than face the truth. And so understanding this, I made it a declaration to myself. Okay, how do I heal my mind and heal my body? And then I learned something called the parasympathetic nervous system, and understanding that one of the best ways to actually get into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest, your counterbalance to the chaos of the sympathetic, is for you to understand that you can get there by decreasing your heart rate. And I came up with this small little idea. Well, if parasympathetic means rescue, well, then maybe that's kind of like a parachute. And I started thinking about this idea. When you are in a hypervigilant state, when you're in the sympathetic nervous system, your heart's beating out of your chest, you have tunnel vision, you can't think straight, you're in chaos, right? That place. Maybe Tim had that a little bit this morning. You have to pause. You have to breathe and then parachute. You pause. Just take a moment. Take inventory. What's going on in my life right now? Breathe. Just breathe. Like you see it all the time in movies and TV shows. They're like, you got to stop. You got to breathe. Why? Because that helps you get into the parasympathetic nervous system. So when I started understanding that, I started thinking about, okay, well, if my life is chaotic in other areas, how can I take control back from isolation, from overworking, from worrying, from chaos? Think about this. Right now, we are in the most work-heavy period of time probably in history. We're stuck behind these screens. We're stuck behind the desk. We're not interacting with other human beings as much as we used to. We're in isolation. And you can pinpoint isolation to depression and suicide, even heart disease and stroke, and decreased memory and learning. So one of the things that you have to understand is when you're isolated, when you're overworking, when you're worried, and when you're in chaos, you're going to be in the sympathetic nervous system far more often. So how do you get out of that? Pause, breathe, parachute. And in that, what I want you to think about is this, and this is really, really important. Self-care is not selfish. People, like, you hear this all the time, but in a practical way, I want you to understand something. Putting yourself first is the only way that you're going to impact your community, your family, your work environment, the people that you serve. If you are burnt down, burned out, can't think straight, exhausted, on your 37th cup of coffee, how are you going to serve the people that you're supposed to serve? And we live in this weird society where we carry a bit of shame and guilt around the idea that I need a day off. Guys, you might need a day off, but I want you to ask yourself a very important question here. This is so important when it comes through the funnel of self-care. Are you taking care of yourself, or are you taking it easy on yourself? And I think there's a distinction here to be made, because sometimes we're scared of our potential. Sometimes we're scared because of the shame and the guilt of the trauma being in our way, getting us in this position where we're afraid to move into what's next. And sometimes you have to face that fear. But if you need the day off, take the day off. Just get really clear with yourself. And facing that fear is difficult. We feel alone sometimes. We feel isolated. We feel ostracized because our childhood was bad, because our teens were bad, because all these things have happened to us. But let me tell you this, what you think becomes what you speak, and what you speak become your actions, and your action become your reality. So even if you might be gripped by fear, you tell yourself, I can do it anyway. And you speak those words into the universe, into the life that you have created. Because I will tell you this, my friends, on a long enough timeline, your thoughts can become your reality. And I'll share this with you. I am not special. I don't know anything that you don't know. Statistically, just by my zip code and a lot of my very stupid actions, I should be dead or in jail. I should not be here talking with you. I shouldn't be here having these conversations, but I made a declaration to myself over a decade ago. I'm going to end generational trauma in my lifetime. So what does that mean? I have to think it, I have to speak it, and I have to act on it, because what you think becomes what you speak, and what you speak become your actions, and your actions become your reality. And I know we're running out of time, so I'm going to go into the last piece here a little bit quickly. People are always like, well, I don't know where to begin. I don't know where to begin. I feel alone. Guys, there are 8 billion people on planet Earth. You are not alone. But that doesn't mean that it's just going to show up at your door. That's not how this works. you're going to have to think about what I call the 3 C's: community, connection, and commitment. Community is so important in this healing journey. I will tell you right now, if I could go back in time, the first thing that I would do is I would find a community that supported me. I would stop trying to do this alone. I would stop ostracizing myself from the truth that I needed help. Because let me tell you this, asking for help is not weak. In fact, I would argue it's the strongest thing that we can do as a human being. Think about this for a second. Name one person who has ever done anything great by themselves. Exactly. We are a communal species, but sometimes you have to either seek or you have to build that community. Next is connection. This is where people get confused sometimes. Just because you're in a community doesn't mean you're in the right community. And you have to understand with intention and clarity, the community that you are a part of is in alignment with who you are, your values, your mission, your vision, your wants, your needs, your interests. Connection and community is everything, because if you're in the wrong community, you might as well not even be there. Make sure that you're asking yourself, first off, how are they serving me? And how can I serve them? And making sure you have synchronicity. And finally, commitment. I'll tell you this right now. Commitment is everything in this journey. Everything. You have to show up through the hard days, through the easy days, through the middle of the road days, through the days where Zoom doesn't work, and the days you don't want to go to the meeting, and the days where you wake up tired and 45 minutes late, and the days that life is perfect and you're sitting on the beach watching the sunset, drinking a coconut in Thailand. Every day you got to show up, because this is your life, my friends. There's no Disney moment. Nobody's coming to rescue you, but you have the ability to be the hero of your own story. And if you need help, and if you need support, and you don't know where to start at this, just check me out at Michael Unbroken on all the social medias, and you're welcome to reach out to me, my friends. And until next time, be unbroken. Thank you all so much.
Michael, that was outstanding. Outstanding. So many really great pieces of wisdom, knowledge, and wisdom, like coming from personal experience. Like your story of transformation is amazing. What you have done despite your 10 ACEs score. Holy cow. I'm so glad you brought that up. That was a transformative device for validation. And we've had people speaking specifically about ACEs at all of our conferences. So I'm so glad you brought that up, because it's like, it's not you, it's your past. Like you've got some stuff that's causing things now. And so grateful to that. And I love the idea of the parachute. That's just very like, that's really comforting. Brilliant. Is there a question that people like ask you frequently after you speak? Is there like one thing that ever comes up? I'm throwing, and this is kind of on the spot here, where after you've covered the 3 C's and you've covered ACEs and you've covered pause, breathe, and parachute, do you ever have people come up and go, yeah, but what about ... Is there anything that ever comes up like that?
Yeah, Tim, it's funny. The first thing people always say is like, I know a lot of this stuff, but I just can't do it. I just can't seem to bring it into my life. I cannot make it happen. And what's so hard about this, I guess it's really less of a question than a statement. I guess the question would be like, how do I really do something with what I have here? And that's the part where I dive deeper into this idea that like, you have to do this. Like I think it's very difficult because there's a fine line here, and you have to understand something. If you don't do this for yourself, it's not going to happen. If you don't do this for yourself, it's just not going to happen. And there's fear, there's shame, there's guilt. We carry all the ramifications of our past. It's even genetic to an extent, right? Mm-hmm. And then you find yourself like, I can't show up for myself. I can't do the thing. I can't figure it out. Well, it starts with what you think. If you think I can't, then you won't. If you think that you can't do something, you will never be able to do it. because you've automatically disqualified yourself from the potential. And so what I always say is tell yourself, I can, and start there.
Brilliant. Yeah. And you sharing your story, it helps people to see he did. And like, oh, I had that same issue and he did. Like he did the thing and he thought he could and then he did it. Oh, maybe I can too. And I love how you said, I'm not special. That's such an important thing for people to hear in these journeys. It's like, I don't have an extra chromosome that got me out of all of this.
I didn't graduate high school, man. Like, what do you want from me? Like, like you can do this. You just have to decide.
Yeah.
You have to make a decision. You have to do the work. That's why I said step 2 in that is always action. Action. You have to do the work. Like that's the only way this works.
Yeah. 100%. And then the piece of community and connection, like humans are pack animals. And I know in my own recovery journey, I tried to lone wolf my transformation for several years. Like, I don't need anybody else. They don't understand, or they're just a bunch of, they, as if there's a distinction between us, and then when I realized like in the 12-step communities, all the steps are written with the word we, and they're written in the first person plural, like we. And I was like, there's probably something to that. And that moment, where I realized this transformation is a community sport, it's like a team sport. I was like, okay, but that was a game changer for me, because when I tried to do it on my own, the results were, unsuccessful. And then when I was willing to let others help me and willing to seek help in others, the game changed. And that's what I hear in your story. And that's what I hear in your words. And it's very validating. And it's like, yes. And I know there were other people kind of high-fiving and clapping along the way as you were sharing that. So super, super great stuff. Thank you so much for being with us. Any closing thoughts you want to share?
Yeah, Tim, it's my pleasure. And thank you for the opportunity to be here. And thank you to everyone for showing up today, for being a part of this, because you didn't have to, and you chose to make action. And that's really beautiful. I'll leave you with this. And I think it's something to take into consideration. Though trauma may be our foundation, it is not our future.
Thanks so much for checking out this episode of Reduce Your Stress with Tim Ringgold. I've got a couple of resources for you, which you can find in the show notes or you can listen to right here. So check it out. If you enjoy the sound of my voice and you enjoy the sound of my guitar, imagine them put together. Go to sonicrecovery.com and take your very own relaxation vacation, where I take you out of the stress of the present moment and back in time to a time when you felt happy, healthy, safe, and sober, and then walk you through that memory so you can bring back those feelings into the challenges you're facing today. So go check that out. It's at sonicrecovery.com. If you're a healthcare worker in recovery, check out the Music in Recovery Self-Care Guide for Healthcare Professionals that I created just for you. That's at hcp.sonicrecovery.com. And if you're a healthcare worker and you'd like more information about how to help your patients use music, you can check out the Music Medicine Guide that I created just for you at musicmedicineguide.com. Lastly, if you enjoyed the pod and you haven't done it yet, would you just take a minute to rate and review it? It really only takes about 60 seconds, believe it or not, and it would go a long way to help us make more people know just how good this pod is, particularly for healthcare workers and their stress. Thanks again. See you next time.